Welcome to the Sandpit Startups podcast, where we journey into the minds of the brightest and the best the region has to offer. We're here to connect the entrepreneurs in the studio with the entrepreneurs listening at home. We sincerely hope the next half an hour educates, motivates, or inspires you. And if it does, you know where the follow button is.
Today we have with us Shyam Visavadia, the co-founder of Wasta. He has a background in project management, especially in the real estate industry, in the construction side of things. Previously, he was working on building constructions and building his two businesses. But now he's building connections through Wasta. Thank you, Shyam, for joining us on the podcast.
No, thank you guys. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. So, Shyam, probably wise to start at the start. Usually with startups, you sort of have an idea, you have a need, and you feel a need from your own experience.
Yes.
Is that the case with Wasta?
There is. I don't really know where to start, to be honest, because I think a lot of people know or don't know I'm actually a corporate person. So I actually spent 10 years wearing a suit, going to work, following a very regimental processes, procedures, very structured career. So startups for me until the last 2 years were, something completely new. So yeah, from corporate to startup, a very new process, a new journey for me.
Awesome. And what I'm edging at, I suppose, is usually an entrepreneur will get annoyed by something that doesn't exist, or something they want in their life, something to fill that gap. Do you feel like perhaps in the networking sphere there is a gap, and that's what drove you to create Wasta?
I think one of the biggest reasons why we started Wasta is because we found that in order to succeed, in order to find what you're looking for, you need the right people around you, right? The business, the service is just a byproduct, but the relationships is really where you see the value, where you see the lessons learned, where you get the real support from. And for us, this is our second startup. So looking at the adversities of our first, we didn't have the advisors, we didn't have the investors, we didn't have the veterans who provided the level of support because we didn't know where to find them. Mm-hmm. There was two areas where we spend most of our time: networking events and LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And LinkedIn is only as good as the connections that you have in place. Mm-hmm. And networking events, I'm a very confident person, but I don't have time to spend hours and hours asking people, what do you do for a living? Yeah. And, who are you? And tell me your journey, because people are just not really interested in that. So there's a huge gap for particularly the Middle East market to actually connect you to the right person first time around.
I agree 100%. I do a lot of networking here. I feel like this region especially needs networking because people tend to want to do business person to person. And from what I gather, me in particular, and also peers that I see in these networking events, they much prefer structured networking, because when you go out to a room of people, it's really tough to work that room and make sure you shake hands with everyone and remember them and have some, because you also want to have a meaningful conversation.
Exactly.
Something to remember them by. So what I think is good with Wasta is it's structured to the point where you get put in contact with someone meaningful, guaranteed every week. Yeah. I think structure is very good. What do you think about structure?
Structure is super important. Someone like myself, and I'm sure others out there, and just generally everyone, I think time is your biggest commodity, right?
Absolutely,
you've only got a limited amount of time, and after about half an hour or 45 minutes, any normal person is going to get bored, right? Yeah. You don't want random people coming to you and be like, hey, what do you do? Hey, what do you do? Hey, what do you do? After 3 or 4 times, you'll be like, guys, can I just put a Post-it note on my head and say, hey, I'm a founder, or I work in construction, or I do this, with all my credentials listed out? And so we've been in that position, and we've also been in the position where we've wanted to speak to someone, but either the words don't come out of our mouth, or we don't get time to see that person, or they're not interested, or we're stuck in a circle of 5 people and we're like, when can I ask my question? When can I ask my question? And it's just, you never get around to it. And so then it almost becomes a waste of time. And then what normal people do is they go on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I saw you at this networking event. Yes. And that person probably doesn't see that connection or sees it and be like, this kid is we don't know this kid. I'm not going to accept him. I just want to start networking with the big kids.
Right.
The VCs and the private equity guys. He's just wearing a black tee and, he's probably some intern. I don't really want to speak to him. So when we were thinking about Wasta and you talk about meaningful connection, that's an element that we were focused on. But we actually want to decentralize networking, in which case where serendipity plays a major factor in connecting you with the right person, right? And irrespective of your gender, your age, your background, what country you've come from, some of the biggest feedback is that, wow, this kid or this guy who's just come to the Middle East has just created this fantastic product, and I would have never spoken to him, or we would have never crossed paths because we're just in two different circles, and that would never happen. So decentralizing that, not just in Dubai, not just Abu Dhabi, not just in the UAE, but across the Middle East, will really support you in stimulating better conversation, and that's really where we add the value add.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, it's a kind of a hard place to navigate because, like you say, time is money. And when you go networking, you go there for a very good reason, which is to, whatever it might be, maybe you're looking for funds, maybe you're looking for your next co-founder, or maybe you're looking for some clients. But you put a price tag on all of those connections. And for a lot of people, it's expensive. It's expensive to go and speak to someone that you actually will never, probably in the first few seconds, you'll never do business with them. But especially in these networking events where, you're in a room full of people and you get tied into a conversation with someone, you can't just walk away.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the next 15 minutes, half an hour, God, maybe even like the next 2 hours if you get really unlucky.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time wasted. So
It is
structure is important in my opinion.
Time is really important, but I think for anyone networking, you need to understand what you're looking for. The matter of fact is that a lot of people want to network with as many people as possible and aggregate thousands of business cards and hundreds of thousands of connections online. But if yourself, you yourself as a founder, as a professional, as an inquisitive young person, if you don't know what you're looking for, how do you expect that person to support you? How do you expect to find the right help, right? And, when I was 12 or 13 or 14 or 15 years old, I was just this very excited person. I am still excited. Like if you see me around, I'm very excited, but now I know what I'm looking for. I know why I'm going to that networking event. If it's for VC, if it's for, building, a customer base, if it's to get some information from accelerator or incubator programs, I know where to go. I know who to speak to. But there are millions and millions of people out there who probably don't have the clout or the know-how, particularly in this region, on who to speak to. And having an accessible platform which is affordable and which is driven by data is definitely something I see is needed if the region wants to hit its strategic, political, goals for the region, both in the UAE, Saudi, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan. There is so much opportunity to meet these macroeconomic goals, but I think we're starting from the very bottom and actually doing something that people take for granted, and that's just connecting two people together, driven by data. That's it. There's no AI crazy algorithm. It's we just look at your data, we look at that, and we use an algorithm that connects you up with someone else. And we give you a video link to have a chat. Done. The rest is up to you.
Incredible. Now, if we just roll back a bit, you mentioned that you have corporate experience mainly, right? You're a guy from the corporate side. As someone with project management skills, right? That's a skill stack that's great to have in a startup. Do you feel that the skills and experience you've accrued from the past experience from these corporates helped you play an important role in building Wasta? Or did you have to learn and unlearn certain things along the way?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I think most people will agree that when in your 20s after university, it's good to go work for a corporate, to learn the processes, to learn the procedures, to mature as a person. Again, there's no right or wrong ways. I'm sure people have come straight from, apprenticeships straight into work, and others have gone down the structured route. But just from my experience, I think working with, construction companies in London, UAE, and also Saudi Arabia, they equipped me with the resources, tools that I needed to navigate the corporate world, right? How to have some of those discussions, working in diverse teams, all of these things which are now helping me in my own business. But that being said, after coming, 10 or 12 years working for very large organizations, my approach was very structured. So when I first started my first business, which was Work Panda, the LinkedIn for construction, in my head, I was like, I need a chief of marketing. I need a chief of finance. I need a chief of this, chief of that. I need separate teams. I need a HR policy. I need to write, you know,
quite a big team.
the employer well-being
Yeah.
policy and this policy and that policy. And I was drawing up how a corporate would work, but in a startup world. And we all know here around the table that you can't use the same model as a corporate.
Yeah.
And when it comes to financing, I was like, I'm going to outsource to the best team and it's going to cost me this, but it's going to be the best product. But I'd never even spoken to one customer. I never even asked if they had the problem. I just went and started building it. And this is something that was a disadvantage when it came to going from corporate to startups. I was following a very traditional, methodical process. And we all know in startups, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, bang on. Look, so you've bootstrapped what you've got so far, looking for investment currently. What have you had to learn on the job and try and pick up the skills? Because obviously coding an app is not straightforward. What have you had to learn on the job with bootstrapping this so far?
I think everything. We kind of, obviously jumping out of the corporate world, going to startups, we had to unlearn everything pretty much. The skills were there, but we had to unlearn everything and to really go back to square one. And I think most founders will tell you this, or successful founders will say this, is the first business is always a failure.
Yeah.
It's always going to be the failure.
Yeah.
And for those who did succeed in their first business, hats off to you,
Yeah,
right?
kudos to
But
them.
for first time founders, the first one is the kick in the teeth. It's the lessons learned. That's how founders grow. It's all the lessons all the mistakes that you made, those lessons really build you who you are today. And basically we have basically taken that to the next stage. So it's really about, you know, learning on the job, you know, listening to others, and then basically moving forward.
Interesting. So in terms of hard skills, what do you think?
Okay, so in terms of the hard skills, we didn't opt in. Sorry, let me just track back. Based on what we learned in the first business, Wasta has been delivered in a completely different way, right? We forgot about VCs. We forgot about investment, because I think the first time we just were looking for investment. We didn't even know why we were looking for investment. We just wanted to be on, you know, all these news channels and, you know, all these, you know, social media posts that we've raised money. You know, this company's raised 1.6 million and 2 million. I think everyone wants to be on the front cover of some sort of magazine, Forbes magazine, 30 under 30, you know, 40 under 40. It gives you a sense of achievement. And I think that's what we were chasing, but we didn't really know why we wanted it, but we just wanted to be on every single magazine. We wanted to be seen to be creating something new.
Right.
And I think that was one of the failures, or one of the reasons why we failed, because we were chasing the wrong thing. And then coming back to Wasta, we realized that, listen, if we're going to do this properly, and we're now thinking like startup founders, we went down a completely different route, which was no code, low code. So we actually have no code in Wasta, which basically improves time to market. It's easier to add features. It's easier to maintain. It's cheaper, right? I'm not going to tell you how much we spent, but it's very cheap. Okay. It's not for everyone. So I'm not saying that your MVP has to be no code, but for us, it was the right choice to go through. Our last product, we spent $100,000 or $200,000 on the code, and we didn't even know how to maintain it. So our operational costs were throughout the window, and then it just failed. So having a no code solution, you're only as good as the no code, so the tool that you're using. But for what we want, it was very much the easiest option to get to market, to validate the problem statement, which we did in such a short period of time. And then the second element of that is we forgot about the VCs, and instead of actually going down the raising investment route, which takes incredible amount of time, effort, rejection, you know, some of the VCs didn't even turn up to our call, and we're like, well, spending half an hour of our time to sit down with a team to actually can't wait to speak to these VCs, because they could be excited. They don't turn up to the calls, guys. And for a founder's time, who probably hasn't slept in a couple of days preparing for this call, for you not to show up,
yeah, that sucks.
It sucks.
But what doesn't suck is the no code aspect. I love that. I love hearing about that, because I see a lot of small businesses. I spoke about this on a previous podcast as well. They plow so much money into a fancy website where it's like custom coded, custom designed. But, you know, if you want to change anything on that website, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And maybe a plugin breaks. What do you do then? Or, you know, there's so many little things that, especially with a brand new startup, it's whatever you do in the first time, it's not going to be your final go-to-market product. You need to be able to tweak and change that.
There's going to be many iterations in between before you reach market fit.
Done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
Start now, get perfect later. I fully subscribe to that. I think you just go to market with something. Yeah, sure. Maybe there's like some tweaks and changes that need to happen. Maybe there's some bugs, but it's not the end of the world.
For first time founders like myself and founders that I speak to right now, I feel, and I'll be very careful with my words, I feel like they want to listen to your advice, but they also want to disregard it because they think their way is the best way. And I'm not saying that my journey and their journey is the same, because every single founder and their journey is all different. But sometimes you just need to bite your tongue and actually listen to someone who's done it, because they could, change your perspective, change your journey. Sometimes you do need to learn yourself in order to actually appreciate where you are at that stage. And we do tell a lot of founders that, listen, fail fast, speed to market, listen to your customers.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not doing those three
make
things,
all the changes.
exactly.
But you need to be able to afford to make the changes.
You need to afford to make the changes as well. But that's probably a different conversation. But if you're building a tech solution, ideally you need to have someone there from a tech background to support you in doing that. And I think everyone will say that having a CTO or someone who is giving you advice but a part of your team in some aspect is the best way forward. I obviously made that mistake at the beginning of my first startup when I was building it all myself. But when they gave me the code, I was like, oh, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
So having someone there to validate and to support you, ensuring that you're making the right decision, is always the best way forward. And I know finding a CTO in the Middle East is super difficult, but try to get the right advice. Maybe pay someone, ad hoc, or give them, some equity, like, 0.25%, which goes through on the stages in your journey to actually give you that advice.
Yes.
Or meet people on Wasta and find some good tech people to give you ad hoc advice for free, which is what everyone loves in the beginning stages of their journey.
So clearly your priority is on having an MVP before going for investment. Why is that?
So we are question mark on the investment, because right now, our burn rate is in 3 figures. So it's in your hundreds of dollars, not thousands, right? We're acquiring customers for free just because our customer acquisition cost is zero. It's word of mouth.
Yeah.
I think the name says it for itself. It's a very controversial name. I think everyone says to me, change the name, it's really bad. You shouldn't say that. Why is it bad? No one even knows the answer. I have done so much study across the Middle East. I used to live in Saudi Arabia. I've been here for 10 years. I've got a lot of expat friends. I've got a lot of local friends.
Yes.
I've got a lot of friends from the GCC region. I have people from all around the world. No one really knows what the answer is. Everyone just thinks it's bad. But I'm like, what about if it's good? What about if it's good? What about if it's actually a good word that opens doors for you?
Yeah.
And I think, running on the brand and, why people love the product because of the brand is really how it kind of resonates forward.
And talking about your journey already, I can see that it has been a roller coaster ride, right, from the past. But like, I see that similar to the 3 Ps in marketing, there are the 3 Ps in startup, which is either persevere, pivot, or perish. So have you used any of these 3 Ps in the earlier ventures or in Wasta right now?
Yeah, listen, we perished. So the first business actually perished.
Okay.
And a lot of lessons learned from that. We wanted to revolutionize the construction industry. Construction is the biggest contributor to GDP across the world.
Yes.
One of the biggest industries. It needs to be advanced. People are trying. We tried, and there's hundreds of other companies who are trying, but it's such a cumbersome and archaic sector that a lot of people have failed, including us. But I am still passionate about the problem. And I think one of the perspectives that have worked for me is that we actually killed the first startup and it was long gone. But when we were thinking about building Wasta and thinking about how we can generate revenue when we're not raising investment, was to actually, resuscitate and revive that startup.
Okay.
So we actually flipped it back to a traditional recruitment model where it's percentage on salary, kept a keen eye on the specialisms. So we focus on project management, cost management, architecture and design, and we started generating revenue, right? So we used the database, we used the lessons learned, we flipped it, we took the technology off. We then sold ourselves as a traditional recruitment model, and that's where we generate good revenue with really good margins. So we've actually, brought to life something which died, right? Which we spent 10 years building, right? The technology is there, and it's a hard pill to swallow. I lost all that money. In the future, I'll probably sell that if I can, or maybe running this traditional model will give me more perspective, and I'll bring that back to life.
Right.
But let's see, we're making good money right now. We're growing. We've hired our 5 employees over 6 months. We're getting good demand. The money that we're generating, we're using to build Wasta. So then again, the time spent on going to pitch, to speaking to VCs, which takes incredible amounts of time, we're actually spending that time on building another business. Okay, I'm a workaholic, I love business, I like ideas. And so this is not advice to everyone, but if you do have an opportunity to make money and actually not go down the VC route, why give equity away if you can own 2 businesses yourself?
Absolutely.
Which complement each other, because recruitment's all about networking and Wasta is all about networking. So it's actually a win-win.
Yeah, fair.
And then from then, other opportunities come
Because
come
equity
about.
doesn't come back. You can always
Equity
raise more
can't come
money,
back. That's right. And I think for me, it's like having the experience I had with raising funding in the Middle East.
Yes.
I rather just build 2 businesses, and I'm still not sleeping. So it is what it is.
So I know a few people that are really hesitant to build their minimal viable product because they don't know coding. And I'm just saying, okay, learn coding. They're like, I don't have time to learn coding. It's like, okay, then pay someone to code. It's like, where's that money going to come from? It's like investors, they're like, well, they want to see an MVP. It's like, okay, well, you're kind of going in the circle where you're not really getting anywhere, and nobody is like guaranteed success. It's you got to go get it. Like, so either you learn, you pay someone, or this new option.
Yeah.
I assume it's new, no code. So what is, can you straight up to tell to the camera, like, why you need an MVP before going for investment? Because some people are just like pitching this great idea, but unwilling to actually build something that just shows the starting foundation building blocks of what it is.
I think if you're going to go buy a car, it's going to be very unlikely that someone's going to buy unless they know that car inside out, or they've seen it, or they've driven it, or whatnot, is to then go and sell them that product. People want to feel things. People want to see something. People want to know
Tangible.
that you have put the initial investment in first before you ask for my money. And if you haven't put your own money up front on this product, on the risk, then why the hell would I then put my hard-earned money or my stakeholders' money or my fund's money into you? So you have to put the blood, sweat, and tears in.
Absolutely.
And my journey didn't start after I left corporate. I was running businesses whilst I was at work. And I know for a lot of people, there's non-competes and, you can't do this, but I took the risk. I was doing something that was a non-compete. I didn't have anything in competition with the employers I was working for, but I was still building the network, resourcing it, understanding, reading, and so on and so forth to basically get to that stage. So you have to put the initial risk in. You have to put the initial, blood, sweat, and tears, because the journey is a treacherous one, right? Nothing is going to prepare you for the journey ahead. Even if I put 2 years of float in terms of cash flow into, running these businesses, by the end of 2 years, I only had something like $50,000 left from all the savings I had from working in Saudi and in Dubai and from the UK. And that's a very, very tough pill to swallow when you're literally just at the end where you can't make anything work. You're kind of running low on finances. Fortunately enough for me, I'm a bachelor. I don't have family. I don't have any dependents, but there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there who've got families, who've got kids to, to put to school, who've got, their parents to look after, who can't move geographically and stuff like that. So it almost becomes super, super difficult. So I think the decisions that people need to take is, follow your strengths. If you can bootstrap a business yourself, whether it's buying or selling on eBay or on a different marketplace, or if it's doing something on the side, doing something and making a bit of money to bootstrap your dream is the best way forward.
Because investors actually like to see an entrepreneur if they can make money with no money.
100%.
Then they can make more money with the investor's money.
Yeah.
So that kind of this.
I think we
works in
all need
itself.
to get out of this mindset that
That's a great way of putting it.
I think everyone needs to forget that, once I find an investor, everything's gonna be okay, because it actually becomes a lot more tougher. I think my friends who've actually raised investment, the investors like, have you met your KPIs? Have you done this? Have you done that? What's happening here? What's happening there? And they're on a timeline, because if they don't spend money, you're in trouble. If they spend too much money and they don't hit their KPIs, they're still in trouble. Right?
It stops being your business.
Exactly.
It becomes someone else's business, and all of a sudden you're an employee with KPIs to meet.
This is it.
It's a whole different
with the
ballgame.
businesses that I run, Wasta, Work Panda, the PMC, several different other businesses, I am the boss. I can do whatever I want with it. If I want to give equity away, if I don't want to give equity away, if I don't make this strategic decision, it's on me. It's on me. And again, it's not for it's not for everyone. I'm sure there's people out there who want to grow fast, who need the money to give them that fuel needed to get to the next stage, and that's totally fine. But I think for us as an unsexy product in either recruitment or in community building, where investors really don't see the ROI, I'm totally happy with the processes that we're following.
Yeah. I suppose it sometimes mostly boils down to if you want it to be a performance business or a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just just enjoy this business. I'm happy with the way it.
This is it. Going. I think both me and my co-founder are both on the same page. And I think for anyone who is starting a business, you need someone who's, the rock, who's kind of really supporting you, or even disagreeing with you at times, because we fight all the time. I think that's very common amongst founders. You might have different ideas, different directions, and a lot of businesses fall apart, not because the problem set is not there or there's no market need. It's just because the team is completely wrong. So when you're looking at pitch decks and whatever, the first question an investor will ask is, how do you know your founder? How well do you know your founder? Have you built anything with them before? And I think Y Combinator, how they structure their businesses and what they ask you and how they, give you advice on how to find the right people is, if you've got the right team and you genuinely get on well, and if by chance you've actually, worked on something together, really is the foundations to something potentially great. Yes. Once you've got that and you're kind of yin yang, you work together, you bring in different skills, because me and Lolita are so different, trust me. Okay. She's more like, let's just take a step back. What is this? And I'm like, no, let's just go and fire this missile straight there, and then we'll see the repercussions. We're not wrong in either way. Sometimes it's good to fail fast, but sometimes it is good to take a step back and say, actually, what are we actually doing? Is this the best way forward? Go to our network, ask for some advice, and then make the decision. But me being me, I'm just like, go. And sometimes go is not the right way forward. So having the right person there is also good. And having others around you, consultants, freelancers, so on and so forth, who are also working for other startups. It's also good to get perspective off them. Not to say you have to take their advice, but it's also good to get perspective to then make a, value-driven decision to what should go next. So I think team is super, super, super important when you're building a startup. And also from an emotional perspective as well, like you get drained. Like I feel drained. I felt drained for maybe 6 months in the journey that I was in with Work Panda, like mentally drained. Like after so much failure, it's like, how many times do you want to be hit by a car? Or a brick or a sledgehammer?
Zero.
Like, you don't sleep, you're pitching all the time. Everyone's like, no, rejection emails come through. People don't turn up for calls. Sometimes, your product is failing. You have a fight with your co-founder. All of it comes at once. You're just like, what more do I need to do for this startup to get off the ground? We're not even off the ground yet. The 2 wheels are firmly on the runway. What do I need to get this off the ground? And emotionally, that's just like, it's a hard pill to swallow. To kind of get over that stage.
When you're at that moment and you feel like everything is the worst it can possibly be, it's almost like this relief where you feel like, oh, okay, actually this is the worst things can get.
Yeah.
And then you take a step back and you're like, okay, actually, if this is the worst it's gonna get, like there's only better days ahead, and it's not that bad actually. It feels pretty bad, but if this is the worst, utterly the worst, then it can be better.
I think everyone looks into my life through social media and they're like, oh, he's living a great life, flexible working, he does this, he wakes up at 10 a.m. in the morning, but you don't know what's happening behind the background. You don't know the pressures of what's going on. My parents are like, oh, why aren't you married yet? And I'm like, well, mom, I'm building this. Don't worry about building. Go get married. Why don't you bought a house? Your friends are buying houses and getting married and having kids. And I'm like, Mom, you don't understand. Unless you're an entrepreneur, you don't understand anything that's going on in my life. And there's so many sacrifices that we make as founders that no one will ever understand unless you're building something. And we will sacrifice everything, the time, the going out, the parties, the holidays, the weddings, all the stuff that we would love to go to build something that we don't even know that's going to succeed or not. And this is very, very difficult. And a lot of people don't talk about that side of entrepreneurship and building a business, all the sacrifices that they've made.
And the risk that we take also.
Exactly. And I think everyone is like, oh, he's ringing the NASDAQ bell because his dad was the founder of the company that bootstrapped that business. You're like, where the hell did you ever get that story from? Like, everyone's just waiting for that moment where we ring the bell or when we get acquired. But, hats off to the people who have been acquired or have sold their businesses, because honestly, it is super, super, super difficult.
Yeah.
And whilst anyone's looking into my life thinking this guy's is very successful, I've not even started yet. I've just finished building the foundations.
Right.
Now we're gonna hopefully start getting off the ground.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And talking about networking, right? There are, let's say, certain accelerators, incubators out there which like provide a matchmaking service in case you don't have a co-founder. So in my previous venture, whenever I met with investors, even though they liked the idea, they mentioned that because you're a solopreneur, we are not investing in you. If you had a co-founder, it would have been great. So how did you meet your co-founder, and how does that probably come towards Wasta also?
Yeah. So I actually met Elisa. She was actually my next door neighbor. So that's how we met. So she was my next door neighbor, but we also had that 7 degree of connection. So she actually knew 2 people from back home that I knew as well, who also introduced me to her when she came to Dubai. So it was kind of like the stars aligned in terms of, this was crazy. But we didn't forge the relationship then. It was actually 4 or 5 years down the line when she actually moved back from Dubai to London, where I actually reached out to her. So when we built Work Panda, I was taking over the stack. And they were like, where do you want the repository? And I was like, what do you mean the repository? They're like, so who's taking over? And I'm like, what? Taking over what? They're like, well, we're finished with our scope of work. You need to now take over and maintain it. I'm like, okay, then I don't really know. So the first person was like, I think this girl I used to live next to, she used to work in tech. So let me just speak to her. Spoke to her and I was like, hey, I'm looking for a chief technology officer. And she works in a very large business at that time in software development, but I never asked her the question. I just said, find me someone and report back to me tomorrow. So she went out looking, nothing happened. And then I spoke to one of my advisors who used to live in Dubai, but lives in New York right now. And he was like, just take a step back and tell me what you've done to find your chief technology officer or someone to take over your stack. And I was like, I spoke to this girl and she's going to go find me someone. And she was like, okay, cool. Who is this girl? And I gave her a background. She was like, have you asked her the question? Have you asked her to become your CTO? And I was like, wait a minute, pause. Hey, Lolita, would you like to be my CTO? She was like, all right then. She came on, she took over the repository of Work Panda. Cut long story short, it basically fell apart. She said, I'm out. I didn't sign up to this.
Okay.
Came back to Dubai, called her, says, Lolita, we've gone through too much to now quit. Why don't we start something new? We used, platforms like Lunch Club and LinkedIn and all of these different sites. We were like, imagine we had a tool that matched people up. And she was like, oh, like something cool. And I was like, Then we started saying, okay, Wasta, because that meant something to me and to her and to everyone else. And that's how the name came out. The same conversation we posted on LinkedIn to say, we will connect anyone in the Middle East who wants to be connected. Got some like 200 likes, right, on that. And then we created an Airtable with all those people's names. And we manually, for 1 year, connected people together based on what we thought off their LinkedIn they wanted to see. And surprise, surprise, we found a lot of synergies.
It was a website then, right?
The website came after.
The website came
after. And
after.
then after that, we came on
because
to
I
the
remember
mobile
using
app.
the website, and it was also matchmaking through emails.
Yeah. The idea really came up in 24 hours, and our
Okay.
MVP was the MVP 1 or -1 was actually going on LinkedIn and actually saying, does anyone want to be connected? We've started a new business called Wasta. It wasn't the post that caught people's attention. It was the name that caught people's attention. And I think because the name is so controversial here, and it had some sentimental value for each person, whether you're an expat or you've moved here when you're younger, or you're a local, or you're from the GCC, it meant something to you. And then put that in the context of the post.
Yes.
That's really where it came to life. And then when people were writing on LinkedIn, I met my co-founder on Wasta. I raised my seed funding through Wasta. I, moved to a different market with Wasta. I found a job through Wasta. This is really where the name prevailed. And this is how our name basically came more, apparent in the region.
Yes.
And then, the National picked us up, and
Okay.
all these other newspapers started picking us up, and everyone's like, this is super, super interesting.
Yeah.
And then that's really kind of how everything kind of rolled out
So
with Lolita.
clearly community is at the foundation of all of this. And the way that I see it is whether, this is like how Facebook started. They built a community first, and then they worried about how to monetize it. Do you feel the same way in that before you go for investment, you're going to just build this community that will excite investors? And why do you think that excites them?
I'm not worried about investors. So I'm not looking at this from a commercial standpoint, being like, oh, I wish this investor will come and invest in us. That's not the point. For me, it's actually building an amazing community that we retain our users, value is driven towards it, and we can see tangible outputs to what we're doing in the region, right? Connections and networking is not about aggregating millions and millions of users. Okay, if you're VC backed, then yes, that would be amazing. But for us, it's actually driven by quality. As soon as we lose that quality, and I've told Aaliyah the same thing, as soon as we stop having fun or we don't see the value in what we're doing, this startup is going to be canned, whether people like it or not. And that's something we draw testament to between ourselves. That's just something that we've said to each other. We don't want just to be another Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, Dealmill, LinkedIn, all of these communities where people are just connecting and nothing happens. Like, we really want to actually focus on the quality in the region, which basically means that not people from outside can get in, for the region, for us, by us.
Just to challenge you a little bit, the way that I see it from the outside perspective is the algorithm brings the quality. And because it's algorithm based, I know back in the day you were manually connecting people, but surely the algorithm, because that brings the quality, that's actually scalable.
Yes. So in terms of the connections, like, we are only as good as the data sets that are given to us by our customers, and how we align that and to match people. But that's not where the quality comes in. The quality is that we verify each and every member before they sign up to the community.
Okay.
So I apologize anyone on the wait list. I also apologize if you've been rejected, but maybe you live outside of the region, or we think that you're soliciting some sort of romance, or you're soliciting business development, or you're soliciting explicit sales. Because I don't want to sit in a 15 or 20 minute blind date when someone's like, hey, I've got this great product and it does this, and why don't you just sign up for $99 a day or whatever it is, right? Like, that's boring. Like, okay, if something happens because you both want it to happen, that's totally fine. But we curate our community so you can have that meaningful conversation, which is what you mentioned at the very beginning part of the podcast. It's about meaningful.
Yes.
It's about one-on-one. Wasta, there is an overarching aspect that the region really hasn't focused on, which is regional matching. I don't want to speak to someone in London. I don't want to speak to anyone in New York, because they have no relevance to my business journey, or they have no relevance to me at all being in the Middle East. The business culture is completely different. The demographic is completely different. So it's, again, for us, by us, and having something which is localized for this region, where people can actually say, I had a great call, why don't we meet for coffee? Or I'm coming to Saudi, let's meet up. Let's go to this event together. And that's something which I think is very important, which none of the other platforms do within a certain degree. They do something similar, which is matchmaking, but in terms of how we matchmake and what we want to empathize with our customer. And that empathize is very important, because relationships is driven by emotion. That's what we want. That's exactly what we want there. We are not looking to drag people off platforms. We're not here to reach 1 million people. It would be great, but we do know that if we get this wrong and we don't verify the right people and we don't manage and maintain the quality, because community needs to be regulated, then we will fail. And this is why we're taking our sweet time in curating that. And then we'll have to figure out, how do we overcome that by not having someone curate that? And that's something that a lot of community managers struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I would love to sit here and ask you more questions, because clearly there's so much further that we can dig with this, but we've run out of time, I'm afraid.
Perfect.
So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
I do believe that Wasta is going to be a realization of your network is your net worth. And it will probably be a lightning rod for serendipitous moments for all the users there. And looking forward to using the app as well.
Yeah, and now that I'm on the app, I can't wait for my story.
Yeah.
Who am I going to meet?
Thank you for joining in today's discussion. Hope you had an insightful and inspirational experience.
We've got plenty more episodes and snippets coming out all over social media and Apple Podcasts, so be sure to follow for more.
Until then, Sandpit Startups.